I said a while ago that I wasn't going to criticize the Biden administration. And I said this for two reasons. One is that the media seems to be very biased in its coverage, especially in the context of what Biden came into office facing, which I'll get to in a second. But they also did the same thing with Hillary Clinton vis-a-vis Donald, and I'm really, really tired of it. The other reason is because the media portrays the Biden administration as if it's a normal administration that followed another normal administration. And nothing could be farther from the truth. First of all, I think this does a great disservice to the American people because it prevents them from understanding fully exactly what's going on politically in this country. So the other problem with that is that it completely elides the profound issues that the Biden administration came into office facing. We were dealing with a still raging pandemic. We were dealing with a severely damaged economy. We were dealing with a country that was weakened in almost every aspect and had been over the last 5 years. Plus, of course, the fact that the previous administration was responsible for the deaths of over 1 million Americans. There's nothing normal about what Joe Biden came into office facing. There's nothing normal about what the deeply corrupt, traitorous administration that preceded him left him to deal with. So the other thing that the media fail to get around to mentioning is the fact that in addition to everything else, the Biden administration has to work with a Congress that has in office seditionists. People who, on January 6th, either chose not to certify the free and fair election and or chose to side and have chosen to side with the insurrectionists. But when I say I'm not going to criticize the Biden administration, I'm talking about policy. I will not criticize Biden or the Democrats' approach to getting policy initiatives passed or the policies that they've crafted. Because let's face it, right now, the Democratic Party is the only pro-democracy party in this country of the two major parties. The other party is a party of fascists. The Democratic Party is the only party that wants every eligible American to be able to vote easily and have their votes counted. It is the only party that believes in bodily autonomy for everybody. It is the only party that thinks science is real and that climate change is a serious threat to our country and must be dealt with the urgency it deserves. Now, the Democrats have a very broad, diverse coalition of people. And in the past, they had the luxury of negotiating with each other, just as they had the luxury of negotiating with Republicans. Hopefully, that's going to be the case again. But we don't have that luxury now. We just don't. We're fighting for one thing. And what that means is that we all have to fight for that one thing together. We have to set aside our differences. We have to set aside our most important policies, our own agendas, and we have to come together and unite in the way that Republicans have for a very long time for their own nefarious purposes. We have to come together and fight for democracy. So if I feel like the Democrats don't quite understand the threat we're facing, or if I feel like they are ceding ground to a Republican Party that should not be negotiated with, then I'm going to say something, because this isn't about policy. It's about tactics. So I think of it as, in terms of negotiating. When Barack Obama came into office, he inherited an economy that had been absolutely devastated by George W. Bush, and he needed to get a stimulus package through Congress. He came in asking for what he wanted. That's always a mistake in a negotiation, especially when it's something like money. The Republicans come in saying that they will give nothing. So the Democrats should always ask for like 5 times what they want. Because, again, the Republicans don't care. They don't want the American people to have anything. By the same token, when you're talking about gun control, for example, the Republicans want everybody at all times to have any kind of gun they want under any circumstances. The Republican starting position should be nobody should have any guns at any time ever. We should be at equal and opposite ends of that spectrum, and then maybe instead of getting nothing, we'll get something of what we want. There are some things, however, with which you do not negotiate. And one of those is with fascism at the expense of democracy. Democrats, I beg you, stop trying to achieve bipartisanship. It doesn't exist. And even if it did, it is no longer a desirable thing because they don't fucking care. You do not make common cause with fascists. You do not cede the ground to people who are out to destroy you, your constituents, and your whole goddamn country. I'm really excited to welcome my next guest, Tara Setmayer. You've seen her on The View. You've seen her on Good Morning America. She's also the host of the excellent live stream, The Breakdown, with co-host Rick Wilson. And she's a senior advisor for the Lincoln Project, all of which I'm going to talk to her about. But I just want to get right to it. Tara, it is so good to see you and to have you here and to give me something to aspire to because you have such a beautiful home behind you.
Well, thank you, Mary. And like I was telling you before, it's Room Raider approved. So once we did it, we kind of had to keep going with the different themes for the different seasons with my background. It's just a little fun during the COVID times of being stuck in your house and broadcasting from here. So I'm glad it makes, brings you joy.
It does bring me joy. And it gives me something to work towards.
Now your background's great. You've got plants. Yeah. You've got some art. You've got It's great.
It's shaping up. It's shaping up. Anyway, one of the reasons, there are many, but one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you because, first of all, you've only interviewed me before. So I get to ask you the questions for a change. And we did one event together, but it was
for
very
UVA,
circumscribed. Like we didn't get to speak to each other at all or at length. So I have been following you on Twitter for a while, long before we met, and paying close attention to your journey. Because I think in this day and age, it's really difficult if you were a Republican to stand on principle and to move forward with integrity, given what's at stake and what happens to people like you who in November 2020 left the party very publicly. So I'm curious to know, first of all, how have you been in the context of that really powerful stance you took?
Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you for having me. I feel like I know you because I've been following you for a long time and I read your book and I always pay close attention to what you have to say because you're always so insightful and focused on things. And I appreciate that about you. So I'm glad to be able to spend a little time with you today. The last 5 or 6 years have been surreal. I spent 27 years in the Republican Party, very entrenched as a conservative communications expert. I worked on Capitol Hill for 7 years. I I went to George Washington University in Washington, D.C. So I've been involved in politics since I was 17, 18 years old. And to watch what has happened since the era of Trump was ushered in to the Republican Party that I was so dedicated to being a part of and helping elected officials win and work on presidential elections. And as a Republican conservative, like there were things that the ideology to me was part of my worldview. Yep. To watch that completely just implode and to see how many people were willing to sell out the principles that I thought were unmovable, all for Donald Trump, for your uncle, I was like, this isn't happening. If you would have asked me 10 years ago when the Tea Party was ushered in, and I wasn't thrilled with the way the Tea Party handled itself, but some of the policy principles I agreed with as far as fiscal responsibility and being tough on immigration and more from a law enforcement perspective on it, because I come from a law enforcement family. So there are a lot of things wrong with our immigration system that needed to be fixed. Strong borders, strong national defense, low taxes. I didn't like Obamacare because I thought it was government overreach, typical Republican stuff. Mm-hmm. But their tactics I didn't quite agree with, and I thought they were going a little rogue. And sometimes when you're so much of an ideologue, that doesn't work well with actually governing. So I was like, yeah, that's not great. And some of the language that was coming out of the Tea Party, I wasn't thrilled about with some of the culture war stuff. And even with immigration, I was like, not great. But then when Donald Trump became a force within the Republican Party in 2015, when he declared, and I was one of those people who was like, listen, there's no way. Because I'm from Jersey. I grew up, I know Donald Trump. Right.
We thought we did anyway.
Okay, yeah, no kidding, right? And I'm like, there's no freaking way. No one's going to take this guy seriously. We all know what it is. It's another racket for him. It's it's a PR move. He's not serious about this.
He'd done it before.
Right. And I was like, I, like many others, were wrong about how prime the Republican Party was for a demagogue that was flashy, that was willing to say anything, that was willing to give credibility to the fringes, how ready the party was to accept that. And I was in absolute disbelief. So over the last 5 years, I became one of the more prolific Never Trump voices in the Republican Party. I was with CNN for all of that time, from 2015 to 2021, actually through the inauguration. And I was a deadly weapon because I knew the playbook. I knew the players. Right. I knew the hypocrisy. So the Trump acolytes really never liked debating me because they knew that I would call them out on their shit. And they couldn't use any of the standard lines with me because I was I'm brutally honest, and like I said, I'm from Jersey, so I'm tough, right. And they weren't going to rattle me with their bullshit. So, right. But it became exhausting, and it also became really depressing for me because I watched people I admired and worked with. Personal friends of mine, one of my closest friends, she was like a sister to me. I was the maid of honor in her wedding. We haven't spoken in over a year and a half. We haven't seen each other in 2 years. We are basically on opposite sides of the Civil War here. I'm with the Union. I'm a Union general. She's with the Confederacy. And it's ruined our relationship because she is a Fox News person. Let's just leave it at that. And it's been devastating to watch that. But it's also given me a renewed sense of purpose because God obviously blessed me with a gift of communication and has given me this platform to help inspire others to stand up and speak out and do something about where they see the country going and to stop this movement that Trump has unearthed.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to get into there, but first and most obviously, you talk about your now estranged friend, and
one of many.
Same here. And what I wonder is, do people not understand that this is unheard of? I'm so tired of the word unprecedented, but it is unprecedented. I used to have plenty of friends, close friends, who were Republicans, and it just can't happen anymore. And I mean, in this context, obviously we're talking about Republicans who support him, but by the way, that's almost every single elected Republican at this point, which is horrifying. But the other thing I wanted to touch on is, and one of the things that I've always appreciated about you is your willingness to speak truth to power. Your, I think it's an inability to pull punches, which I love.
I can't help it. It's in my DNA.
But we need that. We need more of that. Do you have any insight into why Democrats don't seem to have that skill?
It's funny because now that I'm fighting on the same side with a lot of my Democratic friends, we were brutal enemies during our political days and fights on the Hill and stuff. But you would still be able to go, like the old adage, right? We could go and still have a drink after. It wasn't as personal, to your point before, where there were policy differences. And yeah, there were some. We had worldview differences on things. But for the most part, it wasn't like a fundamental character flaw for you to be a Democrat or a progressive or conservative, whatever, Now, there is no lukewarm gray area. If you support Donald Trump, I have nothing in common with you anymore because it tells me everything I need to know about who you are as a person. And so now when I try with love to tell my Democratic friends, listen, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, Republicans are going to get away with this. Yeah. That's why Rick Wilson and I are such a dynamic duo. We have a lot of fun together on the breakdown, but what the Lincoln Project does and why the Lincoln Project was successful and attractive to so many Democrats was because we're fighters. And we were all in the party, and we all know the playbooks, we know the players, we know the strategy. So that's the best weapon to have, is when you have someone that knows the other side, we can tell you how to fight. But Democrats are so worried about offending people a lot of times. There's just the political correctness part of it, and you want to be woke or whatever the hell the term is now. Like, none of that shit matters if the democracy goes under. Like, I was saying this the other day on MSNBC, Democrats have to get their heads out of their asses. And it shows, like, polling and their focus groups are showing that this is right. What we've been warning about, if Democrats don't stop this and start focusing and meeting people where they are and recognizing that you've got to hit Republicans back, they're going to barrel over them, and it's going to be a nightmare a year from now when Republicans are back in power.
Right. And, you talk about the Republican playbook, and what the Democrats fail to realize is that the playbook they're using doesn't exist anymore.
Correct.
Because the Republicans burned it to ashes.
Yes.
So, and I spoke about this earlier. This isn't about criticizing the Biden administration or Democratic policies or anything. This is about tactics. This is about pushing them to do what needs to be done so we can literally save American democracy. So it's fascinating to me because I think that you and I probably disagree about most things policy related.
Policy-wise, yeah, probably.
But I think we both want the same thing. We want a strong democracy where we can go back to having those policy fights, which is what you were talking about earlier.
I say that all the time. Like, can we just argue over like marginal tax rates again? I would love that.
Right. So it kind of feels like the message that we need to put out there, and I'd love to know what you think about this, is we're all one-issue voters this time around. We're voting for democracy. Or fascism, depending on what side of things you're on.
Yeah. Like in 2020, we said it was a binary choice, right? It's America or Trump.
Right.
And I don't know that in going into the midterms in 2022, that Democrats are able to communicate that message. At least as of right now, they haven't. Right. They're still mired in policy debates. This is not a policy election, unfortunately. No. It's admirable. Right. I get it. Like, policy is important. It impacts people's lives. This is true. And you do need to do some policy stuff. But that is not going to determine control of Congress and the future of the country. Like, there are existential threats to our democracy. And if January 6th wasn't the most stark reminder of what we're facing, then I don't know what else is. I don't know what else it's going to take for people to be shaken out of this malaise of, well, it's politics back to normal again now. Trump's out of office. We can go back to the way we used to. No, you have to play the game in front of you. Democrats can't, like you said, take a playbook for an enemy that doesn't exist. Right, their opponent doesn't exist anymore, so they have to adjust. And I think that there are some of the older Democrats, the ones that the new breed of Democrats don't really like, like Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and all the old guard over there, James Clyburn. I call them the OG triumvirate because they've been around for a long time.
Oh, that's
but
great.
They know politics.
Yeah.
Right? There are the rough and tumble of politics. They know how to play that game. And even though I was on the other side and fought against Nancy Pelosi and probably said some horrible things back in the day that I regret now, but I respect her because she's a tough broad,
right.
and she knows politics. And I wish that more Democrats would listen to the veterans, listen to the James Carvilles and the Paul Bagalas who have been in this fight before. Because the way that Bill Clinton won in the 90s is what they need to go back to now. They need to meet people where they are and talk in plain language and explain that it is our democracy on the line. Now that's tough, right? When gas prices are up and housing prices are up and inflation and all these things, that the kitchen table issues that people deal with every day, they don't wake up every day and go, oh my God, my democracy's in jeopardy. Most people don't think like that, but they need to, because that's how things slip away. That level of apathy, that political apathy, you wake up one day and go, oh, holy shit, how do we end up in the Handmaid's Tale?
Yeah, exactly. And Texas already is, of course. And that's true. There seems to have been this terrible, it started with "we go high," which I never interpreted to mean we be doormats while they walk all over us. I interpreted that as we don't fight on their terms because we don't want to become what we revile, which is fascism. But it means what we're fighting for is so important that you better put your fucking brass knuckles on, right?
Well, you got to buy them first.
Well,
right? Like a lot, you know what I mean? So for the ones that already have them, great, put them on. But then the ones that don't, it's like, you're going to have to go buy some brass knuckles. You may not like it, but you got to toughen up, Buttercup, because otherwise you're going to get rolled over. But it's true. The when they go high, when they go low, we go high expression, I think, wasn't meant to be highfalutin. It was meant to be like, we're not going to get into the mud with these people and,
we're not
lay down with dog, get fleas and all that. Right. We're not going to do that. But you better figure out a way to be a little bit tougher with the tactics. You can't be polite all the time. Sometimes you just have to punch the bully in the mouth. All this, you just have to. And oftentimes that'll set them straight. And I think that there are so many Republicans that are just politically craven jerks that they can't see beyond the next election or the power that they think they're going to get. That if you actually hit back at them, they'll fall apart. Yeah. They will. You think Kevin McCarthy is some kind of tough guy that's like, a tough political operative? No, he's not. He's a coward. You think Ted Cruz, for God's sakes, is a tough political operative? He's a coward that can't even defend his own family.
Or Donald. Donald's the weakest person I've ever met in my life.
Which is where I was getting to. Donald Trump. Yeah, if somebody, could you imagine if Democrats stood up to Donald Trump and told him to go fuck off?
Yeah.
Biden almost did that in the debates, which I think people were like, yeah, when he was like, will you shut up, man? And is that presidential? No. But sometimes you just have to be 100 with it.
What does that word even mean anymore? Come on.
Right. Sometimes you just have to just tell him, like, do you see this guy? Stop it. Just shut up. And, it rattled Trump. He didn't like it because he's not used to people standing up to him, which I just don't understand. I don't get the fealty thing with him. And it's disappointing and scary. I mean, if our democracy is going to go down because of Donald Trump, good grief.
Well, I mean, I think it's safe to say that he's a symptom
of, yes, absolutely.
Right? So the ground was weakened long before, but I agree about the fealty, except I do understand it in the Republican side because they kind of feel that they have no choice at this point. And I want to get to that in a second. But what I didn't understand was during the primaries in 2016, why did they have... There was no fealty. There was no reason to have any fealty when they were all running against him. That's when I was just completely mystified why nobody seemed to figure out how to deal with this guy. Just call him a loser and move on.
Call him a broke loser, and that would have been it, right?
Even better. Yeah, that would have been it entirely.
And it was all there. Like, I used to be very good friends with Kellyanne Conway. I'd known Kellyanne for a long time.
Wow.
She's a Jersey girl also. We were in the same conservative circles. We were on many television panels together. And when Kellyanne worked for Ted Cruz in 2016, before she went to the dark side, we used to go get manicures together, and I used to go to her house. I went to her house and had wine with her and her family. And I've known Kellyanne for over 20 years. And she and I would compare notes about all of the times that Donald Trump screwed over the little guy, what a terrible businessman he is, how dishonest he's been over the years. And that was supposed to be the play. Show people that he's full of shit. And there's actually a clip of Kellyanne and I on CNN together before she went to the dark side, laying out that case about how Donald Trump has done nothing but screw the little guy, that he's not for the people that they think he's for. Like, he reviles them. She told a story about how she was with her daughter at one of the candidate forums, and he called his supporters a bunch of suckers. Look at these suckers. Look at these idiots out here, you know? And to her daughter, who was 10 at the time, and making fun of them. This is before he became the sensation he became. So we were like, why? Which is another thing. I've another person that I'm just shocked at. You just look at these people and go, you sell out everything for what? For fame, access to power, for money. And they saw Donald Trump as that vessel for them to become relevant. Look at all the losers and third-rate people he surrounded himself with. These people couldn't have gotten jobs anywhere else. They couldn't have gotten an audience with any serious people, but they did with Donald Trump. Well, exactly. And so all of those people in 2016 should have dropped out. Like, there were at least 7 of those people that never had a chance to begin with, and just they were vanity candidates. And their egos got in the way, and that's what allowed Trump to prevail. So many of those, Bobby Jindal. Dude, you had no shot. Get the hell out of it. What are you doing?
Forgot he existed.
You know, Carly Fiorina, I like her, but you had no shot. You know, Lindsey Graham, you had no shot. You barely got reelected in South Carolina. There were a number of them.
Right.
And that's what split the vote. And my good friend Michael Steele, who was the RNC chair back in 2010, we always joke and say if he had been chairman of the RNC at the time, Donald Trump never would have been the nominee, because he would have sat the other candidates down. They would have had a powwow, and they would have been like, listen, we see what's going on here. You guys are going to have to let it go. We need to coalesce behind 1 or 2 people here, or else we're going to end up with Donald Trump as the nominee. Is that what you want? They could have stopped it, but they underestimated him, and look at what we got.
Well, and there have been many dozens of times since then when they could have, as I said, take the off-ramp away from him.
I say that too.
And now this is a choice. We're dealing with a party that has made this choice. I'm making an assumption, so instead of doing that, I'll ask you, you still consider yourself a conservative, yes?
Yeah, in the traditional sense, sure.
Right. So
not in the political sense that if that means that I'm some crazy that thinks Donald Trump is supposed to be president and like QAnon is a thing. Yeah, no.
But I mean, I don't think we can use the word conservative to describe today's Republican Party.
Not at all.
Anyway, so what is this party?
It's a authoritarian light party.
Light?
And yeah, I mean, well, because they haven't gone full, because they're not in power now.
Oh, okay.
So, they haven't completely suspended the Constitution, but they would have. Yeah. I mean, obviously, January 6th is the greatest example of that. I mean, they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence, for fuck's sake." The vice president of the United States, who was embarrassingly servile to Donald Trump all those years. I mean, if Mike Pence was up, for hanging, then what about the rest of us? I mean, my God.
Oh, forget about it.
I wrote a piece for NBC Think recently about this, about Mike Pence will never be president, that my cat Tiki has a better shot of being president than Mike Pence.
That. That was hysterical.
Thank you.
And I love that you have a cat.
Tiki's the best. He also has an Instagram, Tara's Tiki Cat. But anyway,
actually, my cats are the best, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, it's okay. We all that's part of being a cat owner. We all think our cats are the best.
That's right.
But anyway, like the people like Mike Pence should be a cautionary tale that no matter how servile and obsequious you are, you're never going to get that same amount of loyalty back from Donald Trump. What does it get you? Rick Wilson wrote the book, Everything Trump Touches Dies. So now the Republican Party is dead. This is no longer the party of Reagan or of Bush or of Lincoln. There are no remnants of that party left. They are marching toward this authoritarian excuse making for dictators like Putin, this weird hero worship of authoritarian figures, which was anathema to republicanism. This, spending out the wazoo, nobody cares. Donald Trump, we got to spend this on that. What? We're protectionists now? I mean, there are so many things that Republicans conceded and acquiesced to that were anathema to traditional republicanism or even conservatism, that it's hard to come back from it. They're just intellectually dishonest. All it is about power. They just want power. Right. And they've sold out everything just for that power. And they're not a functioning party anymore. They're illiberal. And they're literally an existential threat to our constitutional republic. And I don't know what it's going to take for more people to see that. 75 million people voted for Donald Trump to get reelected. Holy shit. We need to think about, as a country, how that happens.
I'm never going to get over. I'm not ever getting over the 62 million who voted for him in 2016. The 74.5 million in 2020 was a kick in the teeth. But I think the media have a large share of blame here, because you were saying earlier that people don't wake up every day worrying that their democracy is being threatened. Well, why? Because I think the media I think some of it is just cynical, and it's about their bottom line. But a lot of it is just that their need to normalize the abnormal, and it really worries me, because how do we educate people about the threats we're all facing?
I think the fact that it's been a blessing and a curse that we have social media. And the ability now to be able to communicate to the masses in ways that we never could before. I mean, look at us. We're able to have a conversation on a podcast, and you can put it out yourself. You don't need a major distributor to do that. People, we have the ability to talk to each other in ways that we didn't before, and beyond our own universes. So I think that's one of the good things. It's also one of the bad things, because that's also how disinformation gets spread, and a lot of people get indoctrinated with this nonsense. And we're up against this massive right-wing media ecosystem that has brainwashed millions of people into believing so much crap. It's hard to imagine. Yeah. But even the mainstream media, like I said, I was a contributor for CNN for years, and CNN was just as guilty as others, giving all of that free airtime to Donald Trump in the beginning and not really holding him accountable. If they had done their jobs to expose him the way they should have and framed it the way they should have, instead of sitting back and liking the show, because I think it was Les Moonves who said, he bad for the country, great for ratings.
Exactly.
I mean, they knew it. The media executives knew it, and then it got out of hand, and they couldn't reel it back in. And so now I think they've created this juggernaut on the other side that it's difficult now. People are so siloed and so, in their own tribes that you can't have dinner with your uncle who voted for Trump because they watch Newsmax or Fox or OANN, for God's sakes, or the War Room with Steve Bannon, and they're indoctrinated with this nonsense every day that they're so entrenched in it, and they don't want to admit that they're wrong. It almost becomes like a personal affront to them if you point out to them, no, I'm sorry, 2 + 2 is not 5, and the sky's not purple. But we're the assholes for pointing out the truth. It's crazy.
Right. It's crazy, and I definitely can have dinner with my uncle, but that's a good thing. But it is maddening because we are dealing with facts, and there aren't two realities. There's one reality, and then there's fantasy, and the QAnon conspiracy bullshit. Right?
The fact that there are people who believe this, that are running for office and actually have a chance of winning is all you need to know about the state of our politics now. It's like QAnon believes that there are Hollywood celebrities that drink the blood of children to have everlasting life or some nonsense. What? And people who subscribe to this are members of Congress currently. Are running for higher office in various states with a chance to win. What have we become?
We have people who were active at the January 6th insurrection running for offices across the country.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, our time is really short, and I know you have to go, but I'd like to end with two questions.
Sure.
Just quickly, because I know that we're talking about really heavy, dark stuff. So I would love to know, one, what gives you hope, and how do you hang on to it?
I always try to leave with some aspect of positive thought here, because it is a lot, and it's heavy. And we look at what's going on in the world, not just the attack on democracy in America, but we're seeing this Western style democracy under attack all over the world, from Ukraine to Brazil. But what I am encouraged by is how many people are paying attention now. It's so important to pay attention, get involved, educate yourself, and believe that every single person plays a role. I think for a long time, people were cynical about politics and thought, oh, my vote doesn't count, or politicians are going to do what they do, doesn't matter, it's all big money and banks. And that's actually not true. I mean, there are aspects of that, but in the type of constitutional republic that we have that responsibility. We get the government we deserve if we let the other people win. And I truly believe that there are more of us, more good people who believe in our democracy, who want to do the right thing, than there are of them. They just may be louder. But I'm encouraged by how many people who weren't involved before are doing something about it now, whether that's organizing your local school board meetings and standing up against, what the right is doing, or whether it's even running for an office. God bless you now for that. And I would love to run for office one day too. But anything like that to get involved, even if it's just to, put a yard sign or grab your neighbors and say, have you seen this? We got to go vote. This is this, because every election matters. And the people, you have to be more engaged and more motivated than your opponent, because if you're not, then you're, like I said, you're going to wake up and say, what happened to us? So
that's right.
I think the lesson here is that when the righteous anger of the American people comes together for good, you will see positive change. And that's how we ended up with Joe Biden. And he's not perfect, but he's a good man. He understands the role. And thank God he has brought some respectability back to the office of the presidency, and honesty and decency and character. And it still gives us a fighting chance in this country. It's not over. It's up to us.
Absolutely. To say it's over now is to succumb to cynicism.
That's right.
We don't concede anything. We have 10 months to turn this ship around, so to speak. Tara, I so appreciate your being here. You rock. Keep fighting that good fight. Without pulling any punches. I know you will. I don't have to tell you that. And seriously, thank you so much. And we'll have to have you back again when you have more time.
Oh, I appreciate it, Mary. And I look forward to it. And I'm glad to be on the same side with you.
Yeah, same here. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Now I get to answer your questions. I really love hearing from you. So if you have anything you want to ask me, please send an email to mary@politicon.com. And hopefully I will be able to get to your question next week. First up, we have a question from Mike in Very Red, Indiana. I think that goes without saying, but thank you, Mike. He says, Democrats have won the popular vote since 2004. Were it not for hanging Chads in Florida in 2000, it might go back to 1988. However, Democrats are over-concentrated in too few states. Should we be moving to swing states? Do you foresee any way this could be a viable strategy? Oh my God, Mike, I love this idea. I have heard, I think it's, he was a columnist for the New York Times. His name will come to me. Anyway, there is a movement in that direction. Think about it. Wyoming has like 4 people. If we got 5 Democrats to move there, we could make a difference. It seriously, it wouldn't take that much. I know there have to be Democrats with money who can make this kind of thing happen. I mean, think about it. If you could just get somebody to go build a lot of affordable housing in Wyoming or South Dakota, I don't know, one of these other very thinly populated states with lots of inexpensive land, it could really make a difference. I mean, why not? Wyoming has states like Wyoming, they have way too much electoral power, and it's a travesty. I think there are around 500,000 people in Wyoming. They have 2 senators. There are in excess of 40 million people in California. They have 2 senators. It's a massive flaw in the system, and something like that could really make a huge difference. So yeah, I'm all for that idea. Okay, from Joe in Oregon, or Oregon, I don't know. I'm an outsider. I always mispronounce it. As a psychologist, can you help explain the infuriating, persistent, yet obviously false illusion that the former guy is some kind of business savant? From a psychological, there's no psychological reason. It's because the media and banks and the Republican Party have propped this guy up for decades. As somebody from New York, and Tara and I spoke about this earlier, because she's from New Jersey, it was impossible for us to understand that anybody would think that Donald was a success at anything because he's such a fucking loser, right? He's never succeeded in any business. All of his money came from his dad. It was absurd to think that lie about him would play. But the truth of the matter is, people from outside of the tri-state area saw a very different portrait painted of him. We had the New York media in the 80s and 90s putting him on the front page time after time, reporting on the most absurd thing as if he were important, right, to sell papers. We had banks bailing him out, throwing money at him because they worried that if the illusion of him as a success was revealed, then they would lose their investment. And I always forget this because I never, for obvious reasons, watched the show. We have The Apprentice. Actually, I saw 5 minutes. I was trapped in a waiting room, and it happened to be on the television. And, I saw this very small clip of Donald and his 3 oldest children. And it was so bad. I thought that it was meant purposely to be a parody. I had no idea that people watching it who didn't have the perspective of somebody who knew him or who grew up in New York took it seriously. So that's why it persists. Not because people are psychologically flawed, although don't get me wrong, a lot of the people who support him, the white supremacists, the misogynists, the anti-Semites, the racists, yeah, they're deeply flawed and in many cases sick people. But generally speaking, it's not because of any psychological disorder or deficit. It's because people have been lied to for so long, and the Republican Party picked up that mantle and ran with it. From Mika or Micah, sorry, I'm not sure which. Will any of the other Trump relatives ever see the light, so to speak, and flip towards justice? If so, who might it be? The answer is nope, nobody. That was easy. Okay, from Bethany. What do you think the likelihood is that the Democrats continue to have their head in the sand, lose all power the next election cycle, and never regain it again, or at least anytime soon? Ouch. I don't know. I am operating on the assumption that the Democratic Party will begin to understand what's at stake and what needs to be done. Because we don't have the luxury of time anymore. We really don't. And it's not just because of politics. There have been times, the 2010 midterms were an example of this. The Democrats got absolutely trounced 2 years after Obama came into office. And then they got their acts together and realized they needed to take it seriously. Well, this time around, we lose democracy. So, there won't be another opportunity. The other clock that's ticking is climate change. Another Republican administration would be potentially fatal to the survival of life on this planet because we're running out of time. I have to be completely honest with you. I don't really follow news about climate change. One, because, it's sort of like, I don't watch videos about, from organizations that raise money to prevent cruelty to animals because I would never, I'm not one of those people who's cruel to animals, and I can't subject myself to it. And I do whatever I can to make sure people aren't cruel to animals. It's the same thing. I am absolutely convinced that climate change is the most serious issue facing us. I will do whatever I can to fight it as far as one person can. But I can't read about it. I can't watch anything about it because quite honestly, it freaks me out. But that's another reason we don't have the luxury of time for the Democrats to figure out, what's really going on and what they need to do about it. So, we need to educate them to the extent that that's possible for us to do, and not concede an inch. As Tara and I said earlier, we're not giving up. We have 9 or 10 months to turn this thing around and make sure that the Democrats win big in November. So that's what we're going to do. Thank you so much for watching this episode of The Mary Trump Show with me, Mary Trump. It was such a pleasure to have Tara Setmayer on today. I think we had a great conversation. Please, if you would like to ask me anything, send your questions to mary@politicon.com. I love hearing from you guys, and I will do my best to get to all of your questions next week. Please watch the show on YouTube, and don't forget to follow and subscribe. Also, click on the bell because that way you'll be sure to get every new episode as soon as it drops. And follow us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, except, of course, Spotify. And don't forget to give us a 5-star review because it really does help other people find the show. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next week. Stay safe.